To the formula, yeah.
Mr. President, Tucker Carlson recently had a friendly interview with anti-Semite Nick Fuentes. Tucker Carlson. What role do you think Tucker Carlson should play in the Republican Party and the conservative movement going forward?
Well, I found him to be good. I mean, he said good things about me over the years. I think he's good. We've had some good interviews. I did an interview with him. We had 300 million hits. You know that. Look, I can't tell him. Will you let me finish my statement? You are the worst. You're with Bloomberg, right? You are the worst. I don't know why they even have you. We've had some great interviews with Tucker Carlson, but you can't tell him who to interview. I mean, if he wants to interview Nick Fuentes, I don't know much about him, but if he wants to do it, get the word out. Let him, people have to decide. Ultimately, people have to.
Nick Fuentes at Mar-a-Lago a few years ago. What role should he play in the conservative movement?
Well, I didn't know he was coming, and he was with, as you know, somebody, Kanye. And Kanye asked if he could have dinner, and he brought Nick. I didn't know Nick at the time. And he did. He came, and along with a few other people. He brought a few people with him. Meeting people, talking to people, like for somebody like Tucker, that's what they do. People are controversial. Some are, some aren't. I'm not controversial, so I like it that way. Okay.
Hello, welcome to a new edition of the Right Wing Populist Podcast. I am the Right Wing Populist. So today I want to talk about Nick Fuentes and the fact that President Donald J. Trump refused to condemn Nicholas J. Fuentes. But before we get into that, I want you to subscribe, whether it's on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, wherever the hell you get your podcasts. It should be available. Please subscribe. I would really frickin' appreciate it. So it's been a bit of a tumultuous week for the Trump administration. It looked like the administration basically won the shutdown battle because Democrats were the party that caved. But ever since the government reopened, pretty much all the headlines have been about the Epstein files and the fact that Trump has been calling up until now. There's news on this that we'll get to later. But up until now, Trump had been resistant to releasing any more information on Epstein. Now, there's a real question about how much there really is there to the whole Epstein conspiracy theories. If you actually look at some of the hard evidence and information we had, it's not clear at all there was some sort of grand conspiracy to blackmail powerful people for the benefit of certain governments. It's not clear that's actually the case, but it is likely the case that the government has not been fully transparent with what they know about Jeffrey Epstein. So this has led to a further fracturing of the right. You already had a fracture regarding Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes. So it's Sunday night. Trump's headed back to the White House. I believe he was at Mar-a-Lago, which, is his home. So Trump's coming back to the White House, and reporters ask him about Tucker Carlson. And as I played at the beginning of this podcast, you hear the audio, he's asked about Tucker Carlson and what's his place in the conservative movement. And, to Trump's credit, he gave a pretty good answer and basically said that, Tucker can interview whoever the hell he wants. And of course, Trump has to brag about how many views he's gotten when he's been interviewed by Tucker. Bro always has to brag about his stats. It's sort of amazing. I mean, everyone knows he's a narcissist, but he really is probably the biggest narcissist of all time. I mean, he just cannot help himself but brag, whenever he has the opportunity to brag about himself. But he says, Tucker can interview whoever the hell he wants, basically, and that, he thinks he's good for the conservative movement because he's been nice to Trump. That's basically what Trump said, as you heard. But then there's a follow-up question saying, well, Nick Fuentes is an anti-Semite. What's his placement in the conservative movement? And Trump acknowledges the fact that he had dinner with Nick, and again, essentially, that he doesn't know that much about Nick, but people, get the word out. People should make their own decisions when they listen to the interview. And This is sort of a big deal for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's a big, punch in the face to the Israel First crowd. The fact that President Trump refused to condemn Nick Fuentes. And frankly, Trump probably isn't aware of this, but Fuentes has been going scorched earth on Trump pretty much for over a year now. I mean, Fuentes didn't even vote for Trump in the past presidential election. I mean, Fuentes came, his whole show, the name of his show comes from Trump's first inauguration speech when Trump was talking about America First. That's the name of Nick Fuentes' show. That's how Fuentes got the name, as he's talked about. So Fuentes has been most conservatives in their 20s, they love Trump. Trump's been the face of politics for 10 years. If you're in your 20s, that's sort of the time frame from when you get into politics and politics is really impacting you for the first time. You're following it for the first time. So for young conservatives or people on the right, like Fuentes, like me, for example, I'm a little bit younger than Fuentes, but basically the same age, Trump's been very impactful for us. And Fuentes went from being a huge Trump supporter to being more or less a Trump critic. He has nostalgia for Trump, as you could see when he was covering the 2024 election on election night. You could tell Fuentes was a little conflicted, Part of him was like the 18-year-old and was like giddy that Trump was winning a second term. But then, part of him was also, he felt as though that Trump was an Israel cuck and that the administration was going to be lame, the second Trump administration. So you could tell he was conflicted on election night, and he's been more or less a critic of Trump so far during his second term. And so the fact that Trump refused to condemn Fuentes was sort of interesting. Again, I don't think Trump's aware of what Fuentes has actually said about him. Probably all he knows about Fuentes is his interaction he had with him at the dinner with Kanye or Ye. And according to Fuentes, Trump was actually impressed by him, for what it's worth. So Trump refused to condemn Fuentes. He also, probably more importantly, refused to condemn Tucker Carlson. And this is a big deal because of all the controversy revolving Tucker and the fact that he interviewed Fuentes. And all the Israel Firsters, people like Josh Hammer, who's a Ben Shapiro wannabe, Mark Levin, the actual Ben Shapiro, all these Israel First neocons, they've been going scorched earth at Tucker. I mean, Mark Levin is acting like a fucking psychopath. He's acting like one of my bitter ex-girlfriends. I've had some girlfriends that'll just start ranting about me. According to some mutual friends, they'll just rant about me. They'll, equate me to Hitler. That's what Mark Levin's been doing to Tucker. He's been equating him to Hitler. Which is just like, really? That's all you got? You're going to call Tucker Carlson Hitler? I mean, Tucker Carlson is he's a good person. And again, if you actually listen to his interview with Fuentes, he very, sort of in a fatherly way, articulated why, some of Fuentes' views were misguided as it comes to perhaps anti-Semitism. Tucker makes it clear that all forms of bigotry is evil, and as Christians, we're not supposed to hate people, certainly not hate people based off, ethnicity or their race, or based off, we're not supposed to hate people based off their blood. And Fuentes actually had to acknowledge a lot of that, which was good. Is that a bad thing? And then people say, oh, well, Fuentes is just moderating his views when he goes on these podcasts because these are big, prominent podcasts, Patrick Bet-David, Glenn Greenwald, Tucker. It's but that's a good thing. We want Nick Fuentes to moderate. We want him to act less edgy on these platforms. That's a good thing, not a bad thing. The reality is, Fuentes is probably going to regret some of the more controversial things he said in his early 20s as he gets older. That's just a guess. I could be wrong about that, but I think it's likely he's going to regret some of the things he said. And the fact that he's moderating, extensively, he's moderating some of his positions, at least in terms of the tone at the very least, that's a good thing, not a bad thing. So I'm supposed to be mad at Tucker for that? But again, it really wasn't about the interview. It was more about the fact that Tucker has turned on Israel. And that's unacceptable for the broader conservative establishment. Even though Jews don't even vote for Republicans, Okay, and the vast majority of Jews voted for Kamala Harris's past presidential election, and they've been doing that for years with Democrats. Even though Jews vote Democrat, Republicans have just been, steadfast supporters of Israel. And the question is why? Certainly AIPAC has a role. AIPAC influences politicians, although they, up until recently at least, they've donated more to Democrats. So that doesn't really explain the reasoning, I don't think. It's probably because of religious reasons. There's a lot of evangelicals in the Republican Party, and they've been sort of convinced that you're a good Christian if you support Israel, even the modern political state of Israel, not just the biblical state of Israel. And, I'm not here to disparage anyone based off their religious beliefs, but the relationship between the United States and Israel is not a healthy relationship. It's just not. It's a very unique relationship. We've never had a relationship where one big country always does the bidding for a little country. Okay. Even when U.S. interests aren't aligned with Israel interests, for some reason we'll go with Israel's interests, even when those interests go up against each other. It's a very strange and just unique relationship. And John Mearsheimer, he did a big book on AIPAC and the relationship between the U.S. and Israel. And as he put it, there's never been anything like this in all the history of the world practically. So when you have people like Tucker Carlson and obviously Nick Fuentes saying, hey man, we're supposed to be America first, not Israel first. We can't be bombing Iran just because Israel wants us to. That resonates with a lot of people. And not people who are anti-Semitic, people who just want to put the United States first. Now that can be this is when the problem with Fuentes comes into light, to the picture. And if you're a Fuentes fan, you might not like hearing this, but I'll just be honest. This is when Fuentes can hurt the America First movement because he has said things that are anti-Semitic. And a lot of times they're jokes, and I don't really care personally, but a lot of people do, particularly older people. And it's very easy to accuse the anti-Israel movement as really being an anti-Jew, anti-Semitic movement when you have people like Fuentes going around claiming this is a Jewish problem, not an Israel problem. Even if you think that's true, politically, that's just not a non-starter. It just is. But at the same time, the reason why Fuentes is so popular is because Israel has gone out of control. And again, same thing with Tucker, obviously. The reason why Tucker has maintained his popularity as he saw how out of control Israel got. I mean, I used to be nominally favorable toward Israel until October 7th. In the immediate aftermath, I was like, oh my God, this is terrible. I thought Israel did have a right to respond. But then they started committing a genocide and tried to commit ethnic cleansing in Gaza. And I was like, whoa, I didn't sign up for this. It's sort of like, when you invite a girl over just to hook up, and then the next thing you know, they're making themselves at home, they're cuddling up to you in bed afterwards, and it's like, I didn't sign up for this. You can go now. I didn't sign up for you to have a sleepover, darling. You can, it's time for you to leave. I'll call the Uber, but you need to go. It's sort of like that. I didn't sign up for Israel to start committing a genocide just because I supported them responding in the immediate aftermath of October 7th. So I just think it's interesting that Trump refused to condemn Fuentes. Again, I actually believe him that he doesn't know a lot about Fuentes. I think to the extent he knows about him, it is just from the dinner. So what's more important is the fact that he refused to condemn Tucker. And if you consider all the pressure that's been put on Tucker over these last few weeks since the big interview with Fuentes, the fact that Trump refused to condemn it, I think, is a good thing, not a bad thing. Especially in light of Trump condemning a lot of other genuine America Firsters, people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Thomas Massie, etc. So that was good to see. Now this somewhat relates to our next topic, is also on Sunday, Trump released a big statement on Truth Social, which I will read from some. We always love reading Truth Socials from Trump, because they just he always hits the same sort of beats. He starts bragging about himself. It's pretty funny. So let me read you from it, at least some of it. Again, Trump on Truth Social does these boomer texts now. It's ridiculous. They're like 10 pages long because there's no character limit on Truth Social. It's ridiculous. But let's read from some of what he's had to say about Epstein yesterday. As I said on Friday night aboard Air Force One to the fake news media, House Republicans should vote to release the Epstein files because we have nothing to hide, and it's time to move on from this Democrat hoax perpetrated by the radical left lunatics in order to deflect from the great success of the Republican Party, including our recent victory on the Democrat shutdown. The Department of Justice has already turned over tens of thousands of pages to the public on Epstein, are looking at various Democrat operatives, Bill Clinton, Reid Hoffman, Larry Summers, etc., and their relationship to Epstein, and the House Oversight Committee can have whatever they're legally entitled to. I don't care. And then Trump goes on to brag about all the great accomplishments that he's had during his first term. So this was a good statement, and it's promising to see. And honestly, this should have been the response from the very beginning. Like, Trump does have nothing to hide. He didn't do anything with Jeffrey Epstein. To this day, there's been no evidence that Trump went to his island, did any bad behavior regarding Epstein and any girl associated with Epstein. There's just no proof. All you have is like pictures and video of Trump partying with Jeffrey Epstein. And because of that, we have to assume that Trump's like a pedophile. What? You know, I went to middle school with a teacher. I didn't know at the time, but there was a teacher who was a pedophile. We later found out. What, there's a picture of me next to this teacher? What does that mean? I'm a pedophile too? That's the sort of logic these libtards are using against Trump. Now, in all fairness, the administration totally mishandled this whole situation regarding Jeffrey Epstein. It made it easy for them to, try to imply that, the reason why the administration's not being, they're not releasing all this information. They're not being transparent. That's the word I was looking for. My apologies. I couldn't find the word for a second. The reason why they're not being transparent is because they're hiding the fact that Trump is somehow implicated in these files. Now, the question is, what does the Justice Department really have? What are these files? What are the Epstein files exactly? Well, it's not really clear. Now, that can be in part because there's not been enough transparency on them. That's possible. But you know what? It's also possible, and Michael Tracy has talked about this, who's an independent reporter, he's very good, that honestly, there's not that much there in reality when it comes to Epstein. Epstein was an individual who was obsessed with power, and he liked pretending or implying that he had access to a lot of power. But that doesn't mean he actually did. So in some of these new emails that were released during, the time frame between 2017 to 2019, he talks about how he was like Donald Trump's best friend and he had all this influence on Trump. But that doesn't mean he actually did. Trump was the president at that point, and Epstein also knew that the feds were hot on his tail because of him having sex with underage girls. So we saw his life going to shit and Trump's life obviously coming to great prominence with him ascending to the presidency. So if you look at some of these emails, he clearly became obsessed with Trump. And because of that, he started, I think, pretending that he had more of a relationship with Trump than he ever actually did. I think that's the reality of what happened there. Now, what is left to be shown with Epstein? What are these files that supposedly exist? It's not clear. I will just say this. Even though it is suspicious how he got his money, the fact that Ghislaine Maxwell's father basically got a state funeral from the state of Israel, that's a little weird. The fact that Epstein was a college dropout but later became a college professor and had access to many young girls. There's a lot of there, but there is very little evidence at all that he was sex trafficking women to underage women to give to prominent people where he would later blackmail them. I'm not saying that didn't happen. I'm just saying there's no real evidence that it did. Just a lot of innuendo. And, supposedly there was a prosecutor in Florida who claimed that there was more to the Epstein case, but he was told by the feds to not look into him because he might be intelligence. That prosecutor has recanted that story or has said that the story is misleading. Again, Michael Tracy has talked about that. Again, there's just a lot of smoke, but it's not clear there is an actual fire. Now, there might be, and that's why, to the extent the Justice Department has any more files that have not been disclosed, they need to release them. That's why this statement from Trump saying that we have nothing to hide, release everything, that's a good statement. But why the hell did he not do that to begin with? That was always the move. The move was always, let's release everything, total transparency, and let the chips fall where they may. The fact that we had to go through this, they're hiding the files, it didn't do anyone any good. It didn't help Trump politically, it hurt him. It made it made the Attorney General Bondi look like a dumbass who just wants to go on Fox News and look pretty, which is why she wears 10 trillion pounds of makeup on her face to cover up all those wrinkles. To be fair, her boss wears a bunch of makeup to cover up his wrinkles too, so maybe we shouldn't be too hard on her. Man, Trump has to lay off the orange, man. I know you're really old now, dude, but chill with the orange. You look ridiculous sometimes now, man. But anyway, but it didn't help anyone politically. It was just a disaster. The handling of the Epstein files was a disaster for the Trump administration. And you could see when Trump's approval started to dip was when all this Epstein crap happened. But at the end of the day, there's no evidence Trump did anything wrong. Maybe he's been protecting powerful friends who did. Maybe he's protecting Israel. I don't know. But to the extent there's more files to be released, release them. And as Trump said, he has nothing to hide, nothing to be afraid of. And neither do the Republican Party. So release the files, folks. Release the files. Anyway, folks, that's it for today. Again, please subscribe, whether on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify. If you are listening on YouTube, please also like and comment. It helps with the algorithm. We'll be back tomorrow, folks. We will see you guys tomorrow. Bye-bye.